I wonder if you can figure out what I've done with the Zoom setup. Done something unusual.
Are you suspending it from the roof of your blanket fort?
Why did you say that? Why was that your first guess?
Because I can see inside your mind. I know how you think.
But it's such a smart idea.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. And it's just stopped spinning around.
Just stop twirling.
Because for all I was spinning around, which does all kinds of things to the direction.
Oh, Hedvig is panning. Whoa.
Oh,
Whoa.
wow. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Because Language, a podcast about linguistics, the science of language. My name is Daniel Midgley, and with me is whippersnapper and young rapscallion, Hedvig Kiergaard.
Oh, I love being called young. I'm in my 30s now, so I love it. I'm Hedvig, yes. I'm here.
Are you a rapscallion or are you a lovable scamp?
Ooh, I don't think I'm a lovable scamp. I don't think I've pulled enough pranks on the dean or my neighbor or whatever it is.
No impish monkey shines?
No. What was the other option?
Rapscallion. No, wait, young wastrel. That's what you could be. Let's say wastrel for now.
Oh, God, I don't know what those things are. Okay.
There's a whole vocabulary around this, isn't there?
Is wastrel like a kestrel?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a kind of bird.
Yeah, sure. Let's just say that it is for the purpose of this conversation.
Yeah, okay. Hello, Daniel. I'm very glad to be here. I'm very excited to be here with you and with all of our listeners and recording this show today.
Me too. Now, our last episode was a bonus episode where we talked about the struggle over wugs that has taken up a lot of interest and attention in linguistics recently. And our next episode is going to be a mailbag episode, and that's a bonus episode too. So you're going to want to make sure that you become a patron on Patreon so that you can hear those episodes just as soon as they come out. And if you've got a question for our mailbag, that's hello@becauselanguage.com. And of course, as always, our Patreon page is patreon.com/becauselangpod. You know, we've been doing a series on decolonizing linguistics.
We have.
We had one with Dr. Hannah Gibson a while ago about grammar. We're going to be doing more of these as we go. I've been wanting to do one about Aboriginal English.
Yeah. That's a very good topic, and I like it when we get a bit, Australian.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Aboriginal English is, of course, a variety of English that is spoken by Aboriginal people in Australia, but I wonder if you can tell me what some of these words mean. Are you ready?
Okay.
If I say that something is darty, what is it? What does it mean?
Darty? Oh, I don't know.
It's very expensive, it's very poor quality, or it's very cool.
Ooh. I'm gonna guess that it's expensive.
It's very cool. Sorry.
Okay.
How about this one? Mortgage. What does mortgage mean?
Mortgage. I don't think it means mortgage.
Nope.
I think this is a loan word from an Australian Indigenous language.
Yes, it is.
Which means that I have very low chance of getting it, but let's go.
It is Noongar, but does it mean solid? Does it mean hard? Or does it mean strong?
Strong.
Actually, it's all three. And when someone says that something is mortgage, they actually mean it is the best, it's really good, it's really cool. Kind of like darty.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Like when I was in high school, for some reason, there was a long time when the popular youth slang for something being good was to say that it was stable.
Yeah, I get that. It could be many things. I mean, whatever word gets picked up and used for good could be lots of things. It could even be an opposite thing like wicked, But
yeah.
But that's a whole semantic area that could be picked up and used for super good.
Yeah. Super cool.
There was one that was an Indigenous Australian word of the week. It was wodula. Do you remember what that one was?
Wodula. We talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no. My head is all full with German now.
And this is one of those that's the loan word from English. So when I say what it is, it's going to sound like the English words for this thing.
Say it again.
Wodula. For example, I am a Wodula.
A spokesperson?
Good guess, good guess. It comes from the English words white fella. It's a white fella.
Ah, yes. Sorry,
yep.
yes.
That's all right. It was many episodes ago. And finally, what does it mean to yarn?
Oh, to yarn. Well, it's what we do a lot.
Yes, we do.
It's shooting the shit. It's tell a story.
Perfect.
Tell a story.
Yeah.
A good yarn.
An Aboriginal form of storytelling, yarning.
Yeah.
The reason I bring up these words is because these are words that all came up in a great discussion I had with two fantastic researchers. The first one is Glenys Collard, and she is legendary in the field of Noongar linguistics and Noongar education. For decades, she's been working on creating teaching programs for Noongar with Patsy Koenigsberg and Ian Malcolm. She also worked with my supervisor, Alan Dench. One of the things that she works on is 2-tracks education, which is a way of education that's super good, that values both standardized English and also the language that students bring with them to the class.
We've discussed this before about this approach being used in schools and some people being upset and some people being like, that seems like a good idea.
That's it. That's it. Now, Glenys Collard has been working with another researcher, a sociolinguist, and this is Celeste Rodriguez Louro of the University of Western Australia. These two have been working together to gather stories, and I've been to a presentation of theirs on some of their preliminary work, including quotative be-like, one of my favorites, quotative be-like.
Love it.
I was like,
Steve, you have to get me another blanket for my blanket fort.
And Steve was like, oh, what does she want now?
No, he actually came in and was like, hi, darling, what does he need me for?
He's a keeper. You need to hang on to that guy.
Yeah.
And also he knows about bees, so, it's great.
Yeah. These are things he can do. He runs errands for me when I'm in my blanket fort, and he knows about bees. But it is true.
So I got the chance to sit down and have a bit of a yarn with these two. Talk about their research. So one thing I want to say about this interview before we get started, we know that people in different cultures sometimes structure information in different ways.
Yeah.
Well, this interview gave me a chance to experience this in a very real way, and now you, dear listener, get to experience this too. So I hope that you'll take the opportunity to really listen, and I think you'll find it as satisfying as I did.
Cool. I'm intrigued.
Okay. So here's my interview with Glenys Collard and Dr. Celeste Rodriguez Louro. We're talking with Glenys Collard and Celeste Rodriguez Louro. Thanks so much for making the time to chat today.
Thank you, Daniel. No worries.
You're studying Aboriginal English, and I guess the first thing that I want to ask, it's a question you get a lot, what is Aboriginal English?
For me, it's who I am. It's the language I was born into, the language I grew up with. To be more specific, Noongar English, in localising it. But it's Aboriginal English is English that we use English words, but they have a very different meaning. And so people think they're in the conversation, but there's a whole other conversation happening around everything, so it's not quite what people think it is. And it's not a trick, it's sometimes the only way you can communicate, and when that's the only way, people actually don't know it. Doctors don't know it, and they wonder why you sit there. You're still waiting for them to ask what it was they wanted to know.
I think it's really interesting how you're starting not with, words like deadly or things like that, or, there's got these different sounds in it or something. You started with identity.
Definitely.
Because that's what it's about for you.
Yeah, well, it's who we are.
But also it's all the layers and the genres and the socio-historical context as well. So it's not just a collection of features, is it? Not just some, words or sounds or, anything that stands out as different from what we're used to. There's so much more in there as well that is related to identity. Yeah.
Yes, some of it's historical. I remember when the word wicked came up, and there was the black Ebonics debate in America. Oh, our mob must be, no, I had to go and look that up and go, no, I don't think so, I know it isn't, and I know it's not, and I've got to go through New Norcia stuff from my grandmother who was taken there, a Kimberley woman, and her sisters, they were taken from the Kimberley and taken to Moore River Settlement, and they always got, you wicked, wicked, evil children. So when you've been taught negative, you turn a negative into a positive. So it was good because this black Ebonics debate was going around that Aboriginal people are copying da-da-da-da. No, it's been here forever. My mum knows it, and I know my nan used to know it, and so historically you can follow that line of where it came in and why. Yeah.
I want to just follow that a little bit, because we know that Aboriginal people have had their language, have been denied access to their language, had it taken away. Mm-hmm. Is Aboriginal English a response to that? Because their language wasn't available, they used Aboriginal English? Or do you think this is something that would have happened anyway? Because that's what language does.
It's what language does. It evolved. And I did the first language recordings for the Noongar language. Yeah. So I used to listen to these oldies talk. And I'd come here and sit with Alan and I'd say, I did all these interviews and I'd type them all out, and Alan would go, Aboriginal English, Noongar, Aboriginal English, and I'd be going, no, oh, but that's a wicked story, I've got to keep that, Alan. No, we're doing Noongar and we're pulling out the Noongar. And I'd be going, oh, but that's still real, Alan. No, but that's called Aboriginal English. We're doing Noongar language.
Right.
So that's when I personally became aware of, oh, well, that's what I speak and that's what I know. And it's really important to me. You can't, it was really good. I got taught that through Alan, when he was Dr. Alan Dench, the linguist who supported the recording of seeing how much Noongar was around, so whether to keep the evolving.
Yeah. So this Aboriginal English, obviously you could talk about Aboriginal Englishes if you wanted as well.
Yes,
that's what people do as well. But this particular variety that you worked on, Glenys, for so long as well, and in reference to Alan's comments, they are very they're very deeply rooted in Noongar culture, and there's also a lot of Noongar language in the Aboriginal English. So for example, when we were out in the field last year and we were at a medical centre in Perth City, and I was using the loo, and the sign right out there was yogas. Yeah. And I said to her, yogas, what's yogas? And she said, and Glenys said, well, it's Noongar for women. So they were using the Noongar. So there are things, and in Aboriginal, for women's. Exactly. Because you're translating it into, exactly. So there's a lot of, that's an interesting question as well. Are there regional differences in Aboriginal English? And yeah, of course there have to be, because there are different influences from the different Indigenous languages, and in this case we've got Noongar and English. So Alan was kind of dissecting linguistically what's this code from what's that code, but for you maybe, so in terms of identity and who you are, that was all equally worthwhile, there's no, so the kinds of judgments that we make as to, is this English?
Was really good, but I was...
Well, he was doing his, what
he would
linguists
get
do.
what his job was, and, he taught me the orthography, so it was really good. He taught me the Aboriginal languages orthography, which was really good because
Useful.
I thought, I went over to South Australia and I could see all these Noongar stories. But as the years go by, I can now go, but Noongars never wrote that because the storylines are not right. The way we talk, I often say, hearing the voices. You can't hear the voices. If you can't hear the voices, then you can't address any issue. And a lot of people can't hear our voices if because they're expecting whatever they're expecting. I go into my doctors and just sit because I just go, you think you know everything, you're the doctor, you tell me that's in my head. And my modular mate Patsy says, you didn't say a thing. And I said, so why didn't you then? I don't want to talk to him. He knows I have to go there. I didn't want to talk to him. She didn't even look at him. I didn't want to look at him. And I mean, I'm my old grandmother, great-grandmother, and we're still having these. And she said, I felt a bit embarrassed in them. I said, what for? Don't get ashamed for me. Embarrass yourself. You go in and yarn with him. So whatever I embarrassed her because I didn't want to yarn to my doctor because he didn't want to yarn to me.
So
I don't reckon.
So there are different expectations
I
as
can
well.
pick up. And
unspoken rules of interaction and things that are also potentially different as well in...
Yeah, because I thought I had a really... I did, private health or something, because I had a doctor that would talk for 2 hours on the phone, or, say, I'll come straight around, Glenys, and can you drive out and see me, or whatever, and, but he never said, he would always say, so what's been happening, Glenys? So he picked up that, what's been happening, and then we could have a yarn. And by that yarn, he would work out whatever's happening. So he told me later. He's retired now, and I said, you've got to come back. I need you if no one else does. But it's really funny, because otherwise, what else are you going to say to the doctor? They said I had to come and see the doctor. And did I have much to say? No. They're the doctor, tell me.
I want to focus on the differences of interaction a little bit later, but one thing that you said about how Dr. Dench was sort of interested in focusing on the Noongar and ignoring the Aboriginal English for that project.
That project, and he was lecturing. He did this as another on top of.
It seems like in Australia we focus a lot of linguistic effort on Aboriginal languages. Let's study that. I mean, not enough even.
Ancestral ones.
Yeah, but
yes.
Aboriginal English, it seems to me, hasn't been studied as much. Would that be right?
That's what I think, maybe, because it is my identity. Yeah. Noongars never got to have a Creole. Noongars never got to do anything much because our lands got so occupied and taken up. The Noongar people just kept getting pushed more and more and more away. But
I feel like that getting pushed away is happening with the study of Aboriginal English too. Like it's getting pushed away.
Back. It's back. You know why? Because that's why we have these things called closing the gap, and the achievements will never be met until people understand that the clientele group that closing the gap, the majority of the clientele are Aboriginal English speakers. It's not educated standard Australian English speakers.
Yeah, I think just to go back to your question, Daniel, I think with ancestral Aboriginal languages, because there is such an urgency in the sense that a lot of them are so highly endangered, where you may have 2 or 3 or 4 speakers left, there's always been that kind of narrative around we need the money or we need the attention now. But Aboriginal English, if you think about it, is spoken by approximately 80% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia. And so if you think about it, and if you think about the fact that for a lot of people it's about surviving and trying to make it through the day, and have they got the time to think about whether they want to reawaken their ancestral language? Of course, there's a lot of value in it, but there's also the more pragmatic side of things of a lot of people are struggling, and the way that they communicate every day is in Aboriginal English. And so there's so many interesting questions, but, what are the ways that they're communicating? And culturally, how are things changing? What's kept from the traditional, from the ancestral culture, even if the linguistic system is different? If that ancestral language, say Nyungar language, is no longer spoken fully, what's been retained traditionally, say, in the yarning that Glenys was telling you about? We're finding very interestingly in our quotatives kind of focus that a lot of what is encoded through quotatives, quotatives are little frames that are used, can be verbs, for instance, that are used to introduce, say, in storytelling, what someone said or what someone thought, or even a sound or a gesture. So what we're finding is that most of what's encoded through these frames, quotative frames, is actually speech. It's this hearing the voices. There's very little thought that is encoded. It's all about the voices. And a lot of the times in the very fine-grained analysis of narratives, narrative progression, things that move the narrative, the story forward, is actually encoded as speech. So it's as though these voices are actually the way that potentially people who speak Aboriginal English make sense of their day-to-day reality. And how is it different from, say, mainstream Australian English or other varieties of inner circle, the sort of native speaking varieties of English? Well, there's a lot of thought encoding in those varieties. Does it come from psychoanalysis? Does it come from the fact that these are more literacy-based, written text-based cultures where we spend a lot of time reading and kind of thinking more internally or silently? So there's so much more to it than just the question of, is this ancestral or is this a new variety? At the end of the day, it shouldn't really matter, right? Because these are Indigenous communities that have the identity that we were talking about, but also the need to be heard and to be, to be not necessarily researched. I don't know that the Indigenous communities are so keen to be researched even more. Like, that's another question. Should we be doing it?
I think that's the word.
It's the word, and also
knowing about everything. Because everyone wants to name everything Nyungar. And fine, do it. But you know what? The yarns are still Aboriginal English. And the layers. And I can... Some of our mob will just take it for the yes or no. Some, when you have a mixed marriage, maybe, a non-Aboriginal parent or something like that in your family, like I said to Celeste, I never had Watchler grandparents. My mum and dad aren't Watchlers. I never grew up with Watchlers. I only grew up with blackfellas ourselves. So I've only been around. So what excites me and what is old Pop telling me? He's telling me these real important, even though there's, very little language actually in it. It's more that's Aboriginal English, which we didn't get. The linguists didn't get a chance somehow to develop a type of Creole because of the movement and pushing our people out of the areas.
Tell me about how you got to work together. How did you get the idea for this project, and how did you meet up?
I met Glenys in 2011. I had just arrived here, and I was just, I guess, curious about Aboriginal English. And then Ian Malcolm and Patsy Koenigsberg, who's both very generous colleagues, put us in touch. And I think Glenys helped one of my students understand some issues to do with language and the law. Someone was writing a paper for me based on language and the law. Rachel, I think her name was, if I remember correctly. You helped her and just sat with her and yarned basically for hours, and she recorded you, and then she was blown away basically. I remember the student being blown away, and I thought, okay, well, this is a woman that I would feel honored to be able to work with. And then down the track, I was lucky enough to get this funding for this ARC-funded project, DECRA project that we are working on now. And so this is only the beginning of so much more to come. I don't know what your version of that story is, but that's how I remember it.
It's pretty much.
This word keeps coming up, yarning. Telling stories.
Yeah.
You've been listening to a lot of stories.
Of course.
What's that been like?
Yarning is, okay, tell
me. Yarning. Stories you can make up in a book, and then they stop and they can be stagnant a bit. Yarning is real. But this is my interpretation of yarning. You yarn, you sit around that fire. You learn everything about everything around that fire, from this big to this big. Those yarns, and the yarns are told and shared at different levels for the different ages, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So you can exclude when you want to, or you include within our group itself. Which is quite interesting, because I don't think you can do that with Noongar language. Once it's been learned, it's the words are Aboriginal English is real dynamic. It's
because it's people's native variety. You would have that proficiency.
It's somebody put it on something on Noongar be like and put cruel memes, and I said, yeah, and I put about 15 lines underneath with cruel, and someone put crown of the Noongar be like. This is on the Facebook thing, because I'm going, cruel doesn't just mean that. Cruel, because, and our teachers, you know, when they say, oh yeah, we all know there's deadly and wicked, but our kids never you never talk about death as using the word deadly. We don't say that's
a deadly.
If you got a deadly spider, what would that spider be? Would it be a cheeky spider?
Oh yeah, that's a real cheeky one, and you got to be careful.
Yeah,
that's a real cheeky one. That's danger. See, that's the danger. Yeah. So when they say it's deadly and that it's not got the death. So we have all these.
But what's cruel?
Cruel?
Yeah. I know what cruel means to me. It means,
It's pretty much, it's quite similar. It's, we just had a cruel big feed down there.
A great, right? A great.
Yeah, it was good.
It's like deadly.
Not a lot. It is.
It's hungry.
Terribly.
Yeah, and the emphasis and the context is always, I can't give you one definition, because it's within. That's why the yarning is so crucial, that you know what's before and after, to put it in that context, to make sure you've got it in the right context. And I've done it all.
The way I see it, sorry to interrupt it, the way I see it from a linguistic point of view is that yarning is very clearly based on just orality, right? And so if you are telling a story and you know that you're going to be seeing these people in 1 hour, in 2 hours tomorrow, you don't need to rush to kind of conclude your story as you would do if you're writing an essay or a book, whereby you've got a page, which is the final page. It could continue forevermore, right? You could teach it to younger people. You could recycle it from older people. You could add to it. And I think that is extremely interesting, because it kind of defies the way that we've been brainwashed, in my view, we as in non-Indigenous people from literate sort of societies where the written word counts for so much. We've been brainwashed to think that maybe our thinking has been influenced by all this reading and writing that we do, whereby if you're from a more oral culture where the stories kind of pile up into one another. And, there's a very interesting book by Michael Nunn about how we can use these stories, not necessarily Nyunga stories, but Indigenous stories from around the world, to try and figure out what was happening when, say, the ices were melting and, the oceans were rising. Like, all that data basically was in the stories, right? And people needed to have incredible memories to remember the detail, factual detail, to be able to then pass that on to the next generation and the next generation and so on and so forth. So I think, it also relates very interestingly to epistemicity and how you come about, how you know things and why and who told you, who was allowed to tell you, who was allowed to hear the story, who didn't, who wasn't allowed. So I think so when we say yarning, which you may define as an Indigenous cultural form of storytelling and conversation, that is one definition, but the reality is that there's so many layers to it because it's very context dependent, that I think thinking about it in terms of orality, and then when you teach people about Aboriginal English, say the teachers that you and Patsy Kennisberg have been teaching for 30 years in the tracks to two-way learning, they teach these amazing workshops to teachers, what is Aboriginal English and what's special about it. And yarning takes, quite a lot of precedence in that workshop from what I've seen. And it's just making them think differently about language, that it's not written dictionary or grammar based, there's something else, which we should know about that too. We do oral storytelling too. But I think the fact we've got the written word, it takes so much press, it just organizes the way you think differently and potentially how you tell a story. That's what's interesting.
That's what the doctor that worked for you, that's what the doctor did, right? And the doctor that didn't really work for you didn't do that.
And there's a whole thing called clinical yarning that has come up where doctors are teaching their students, people training to become doctors, to use what's called clinical yarning. The problem with that is that we have there's no way to empirically test whether what we are calling, what's special about this clinical yarning, what's special about yarning, which we can then extrapolate, and use in a clinical setting, because a clinical setting is very time poor. People have to quickly get a diagnosis. Yeah. And so and other constraints, people not being actually Indigenous, but pretending that they are, or pretending that they know what it is. It's, there's a lot of work to be done. That's a take-home message from that.
Yeah, and I could say if daughter was sitting here, who's a nurse, I could say, hungry man, he's got cruel meal on him. And so you're mixing in, I'm saying, this man, he's got those blue eyes because her man's got the blue eyes, but her dad's got the blue eyes too. So you've got this hungry and cruel. These words are in there. It's got nothing to do with food. You're not hungry at all. It's you, the person. You look a lot like that nice sort of smart-looking fellow there. And then someone will say, yeah, Barbara Jerpin cruel for him. Then, so you get these little bits in the language word purely to really cut people out, but you've already cut them out anyway. But our mob don't know that. They don't know that you don't know what you don't know.
Could you walk me through those sentences again? Because I really want to break that down. The first time, so what was that again?
Hungry man there. I'm pretending Celeste is black now.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah.
You can pretend it well.
Hungry man there.
Yeah, hungry man there. But I don't have to point. I don't have to look. Yeah. So, Celeste, hungry man, he was sitting there, and them meow like bones, same in birds, and little fella, little birdie. There's wicked, there's this deadly, he's Murridge too. So you got this It's a bit hard.
Morage.
Deadly, Mordich. Yeah, I noticed I caught Anna as well at the end there.
Anna is
a transfinal tag.
Yep.
It's like a confirmational sort of. Are we on the
you
same
reckon?
page?
Or you reckon?
Yeah.
Or because people will say it's there's a confirmation, but it's not a confirmation. It's a are we agreeing on it? Sort of.
It's a check.
Yeah, more that check. It's got written down next to it as a confirmation, but within the context of what you're saying, it can be. Anna, you was there. You seen Bale, did you? No, hungry man come. Oh, and hungry man could be he's standing, Bale right there, Mum. That means they're standing right here, so I'm not going to turn around because we've been talking about you and you're right there.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to turn around now because, that's a cruel shame. And no, you reckon did you reckon he knew? I don't know, he was laughing. At you or me? Because if he was laughing at what? So then we don't know, but then he doesn't really know because he would have been going, do you really think I'm attractive? Or Jervin is like, you really like someone, or happy. So it's got all these, Nyunga, the words, Jerb is happy, but it also can be like, we have these other Nyunga words that aren't used much, like marong, that I don't hear Nyungas use that much. That's when you're caught marong, Jerpin. That's when you want to be a partner of that person. But what I'm trying to say to you now is what I've been working out is that Nyunga can't talk the depths of that anymore. Huh. A lot of that has not been kept in the language. It's not been found in the language. I can go back because I learned it and I can say these words, and I said to my sister-in-law who passed away over a year ago, and she was coming up nearly 70, hey sister, look about there. That was Alec, that there, because you're watching TV, you're doing 5, 6 things at the same time. Yeah. Hey girl, he's that too, Alec, come we never use this word Alec anymore, and that is like the best, the deadly, all these words. That was the Nyunga word. No one uses it. It's been left back there somewhere in the dark, in the park. So Aboriginal English has held on to a lot of things that I think language
it's always changing. It's always changing, and people get older and younger.
And we haven't been able to update our traditional languages. That will be interesting the day that happens to move forward. We can keep calling houses and buildings maimayas, but I think we have to be a bit more, when the horse came over, our mob named it Ngort, because that's what it sounded like. It made that noise. And when they gave them a deck of cards, when you shuffle them, yabba yabba yabba, yabba yabba yabba. That's how we knew. That's the sound it made. So we could, the people made the cards, the name Yabble. Sugar, well, we had gum, that was sweet. Munya. So we could adapt to the Nyunga words, but now we've run out of all that. But Aboriginal English just keeps rolling.
And I think this is that's a really good point. So when we put together this application for this grant that we were successful in obtaining, that was one of the main sort of motifs of that grant, that Aboriginal English is changing and we don't know how. Because we keep ignoring it in favor of ancestral languages, which obviously very interesting and very important research. We can do it all. It doesn't mean that we should not do one thing to do another. But the problem is that the less time and effort we put into understanding how it's changing, this is another missed opportunity. because language will always change. There's nothing we can do. It is inevitable, as you know, and listeners know as well. And so that's just, that's not something we can do, but we can shift our mindset around what agendas in academia or more generally in society are of interest. And I think if you've got most Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people speaking Aboriginal English, a variety of Aboriginal English, which, by the way, could be lighter or heavier, could be more acrolectal, more basilectal, so lighter or heavier. If you've got a lighter variety, superficially it may sound more like mainstream Australian English, and people may think, oh, that's just wrong English.
Not very good English.
It's wrong English, which is wrong, by the way, to say that. We should not say that because it's a different variety of English. And then the further away it moves from mainstream Australian English, it may even sound like Creole in some parts of Australia. So it gets even more difficult for people who don't speak that variety to understand what's going on. So there's so much that needs to be done, not just in terms of the kinds of lighter varieties of Aboriginal English that we're working on, but also the other thing I really think we need to say is that in working on projects that relate to anything Indigenous, we need to think about doing it with Indigenous people. I know that this is not easy because unfortunately, institutionally, racism it's just so entrenched that Aboriginal people, relative to non-Aboriginal people, we've got very few people that get to do PhDs and that kind of, more specific type of research. And so we need to find creative ways to partner up with communities and Indigenous linguists and language workers and really have that two-way conversation, because there's something that the non-Indigenous linguist in this case can bring, or researcher can bring into the conversation that will only make sense if you put it in the context of what the Indigenous researcher will bring to the table. So I think that's really important as well. So it's not just, it's urgent to save or reawaken this language, or document this variety. It needs to be done ethically, and it needs to be done in a way that we feel is also creating opportunities for community, because at the end of the day, that's very out of whack as well.
It's out of whack for me, as I said, our people, when new things came, new words evolved, and we've got a Noongar language that can cater for a lot of things. I could have a conversation enough, but it's not enough. We haven't produced new words. We haven't got a body to sit down where Aboriginal English just rolls along. And because I've been lucky enough to work right around the state and even eastern states on this, and I don't know all these fellas, and I meet them all, and we all talk Aboriginal English, the common point. So when something's happening, we don't know what's happening in our classroom, all right, but I'm also talking to the Aboriginal workers, and so then I sort of go, okay, so why do the Wadjalas think that? Because I've been doing this a long time now. Why do they think these fellas are translators? How do they think they know what the Wadjala really asked them to say? Because I have to make sure I clarify myself over and over. Like, not necessarily for Celeste, I just said, oh, goody. So I said, we'll go out there. Yeah, let's go. Girl, when you're ready, we're ready. And it was really good because Celeste was okay to believe in me, because I said, in my head, I need to take Celeste to some other places and away from where the typical places that research gets done.
Let me focus on going to different places, because I feel like you've both gone to different places in the course of this research. Celeste, you can't understand everything that you hear.
No.
And Glenys, you might be, expanding outside of your comfort zone in some ways. What's this been like for you both?
That's a great question. Well, for me right now, it just feels like maybe we're hearing this too much in the media lately, but it really is a journey. It's a journey of basically just working with a community that I had never worked before, but not doing it the way we did it, I think, was quite special as well. So as a sociolinguist, my protocol was that I would come up, and I came up with a list of questions, which was a sociolinguistic interview. I talked to people, so colleagues, to say, okay, what kinds of things did you use for Creole and for this and that? And, there were culturally sensitive questions that one could ask, and I had those, and I was going to share them with Glenys. So that I came to it as, okay, I'll run these past Glenys, and then I'll go off and do what my original plan was. But in meeting with Glenys and discussing with Glenys, it was clear that that was not going to work. We were not going to be able to use a sociolinguistic interview. That was going to be shame for these people. It was going to make people feel like they were being put on the spot. It was the wrong thing to do interactionally. And so I just basically at that point, early last year, at the very beginning of fieldwork, let Glenys lead. And so I kind of drove us whatever we needed to go. And Glenys was the queen of fieldwork, the absolute queen of fieldwork. It was so incredible to see. So for me, it's not just the stories in and of themselves are layered and complex, and it will take me, decades to kind of get my head around what's really in there. And then the question arises as to, am I entitled to this sort of treasure trove? Like, am I, as a non-Indigenous, non-younger person, this is an honor. So, there's a whole lot of kind of respect that goes with having this collection. This is, I feel very privileged. But in the research, the journey that I'm describing, just to see how Glenys was recruiting people, if you want to call it that, and how open people were to share with us all sorts of stories, which, to be honest, I don't see myself as white, but in my white fragility, in my non-Indigenous fragility, someone who grew up privileged, that's what I came to realize yesterday, that anyone with education and a roof on their heads and food on the on the table every day, that is privilege. So that was the first realization. The second realization was how generous people were and how they just opened up and told us all sorts of very heart-wrenching stories about death in custody, young people committing suicide. And I don't wish to say that this is all that people spoke about, but to be honest, these things came up a lot. And I asked Glenys, why are these people opening up about being stolen? A lot of stolen generation people we talked to. And even if they didn't go through... Yeah, but also women. There were a couple of older women who had gone through it, remember? And without mentioning names, but people who spoke to, and then the children of that generation and the very young ones and the racism that they experienced. And I asked Glenys, why is everyone so open? Because I'm not Nyunga or Indigenous. I sound like I'm not from here. Maybe that helped. I don't know. But these people were very open. And so Glenys said, well, no one's ever listened to them before. And so this is very interesting because there's also this like a silencing, like a very entrenched silencing of people. And I think not paying attention to Aboriginal English is a very perverse way of silencing the people who are here today and who need to... I don't know that people need to know about Aboriginal English the way that we do it in academia, like read papers that we write. Probably that's not of importance. But the trickle effects of these things, can we apply these things to education like Glenys and Patsy have been doing for so long, and Ian? Can we in any way work with a clinical yearning mob to try and find some more empirical grounding, from linguists kind of informing the analysis of more interactional data? So what can we do that may bring about some change? And I think that's part of the journey for me as well, that it's not just research for research's sake and for my own growth and my ego to kind of feel like I've done something amazing in academia, like in the Ivory Tower, but seeing these people and listening to their stories, I felt like a drive almost to maybe try and do something potentially. I'm not saying that we will, but, at least have the intention doing something different. So it was a huge reality check. It also kind of made me live in this country, in this Nyunga country, differently. It made me, as a migrant, this is interesting as well. We took Andre, my partner, came with me to the first recording session, which was with Glenys' parents, who are both in their late 80s. It was very interesting just to sit down with them. It felt like an honor. And Andre said to me, this was a welcome to country. This means more than the citizenship that we got, the paper we got. This was an actual welcome. So just to be able to, even just to hear all the stories that were shared, I feel like that was, as a person, at a very human level, very kind of mobilizing, very changing. So extremely enriching experience. That's how I would describe what I went through, especially last year, but also this year in a different context, with COVID and working together in the distance. And
No, it is. It's very real, and I understand, that our mob have to get educated, but there's education and there's education. But the people who speak Aboriginal English are less likely to have had a lot of schooling in their life. But there was all of this, some of the speakers were talking about, actually I'll have a yarn because you know why, I'm sick of all these wadgulars keep telling me how I got to rear my kids up. And I got grandkids now, they took my own babies off me. How they can keep doing this? And I've worked in DCP and that years ago, and you know what, it is so true that the gap between Aboriginal English and the so-called standard English, and even the pub talk, is nowhere near what Aboriginal English is. People go, but they just keep waffling on, Glenys, and I go, yeah, well, I waffle on too, but if you don't listen, then you're going to miss the most important part, so you just have to sit, because you're asking the questions. And the questions are coming, but they don't come in the way you think they're coming. So you have to sit, and because it doesn't fit in it just a yes, no.
Then let me ask, just to finish up, what does the wider public need to know about Aboriginal English? You have a chance here to correct some misconceptions. What do you want to say?
It's real and it's alive, it's living, it's a language, and people need to know that we're using it around them all the time, whether they know it or don't know it. We share it, we try and share as much as we share to the point where if we, like I said, if we want to exclude for personal reasons, we've been excluded all our lives for that. Do you know that Wadgulars will say, we just go over here, and even as an adult, we'll just go over here, and it's like, that's them doing that Wadgular talk. That's even now. Doctors do it to you. Teachers do it to you. What do you think I am? I'm older than you. You're only a little girl, teacher. But they need to talk to the white person over there, out of here. And it's really interesting because we just say it. We say it, and then people either get offended or don't like it. No, you're not listening because you didn't hear it. And you aren't asking either about it.
So I think a take-home message would be listen as much as you can. Aboriginal English is an indigenized variety of English, so it's not anyone's English. So I think it's important for people not to feel very territorial about English. English is a global language, as we know already, spoken by more non-native speakers than native speakers. That tells you a lot about the story of English. And of course, it goes hand in hand with colonization and dispossession and all the problems, that colonization brought about. But at the end of the day, today, Aboriginal English is the one way that Indigenous people communicate, do identity, get stuff done day to day. And I think we need to be aware of it as a different variety that is not to be compared to all the time to mainstream Australian English. Let's enjoy it and just kind of appreciate it for what it is. And let's try to continue to learn without expecting for Aboriginal people to teach us, though, because that's the thing. We have to be careful that we don't now want another exhibit on, another power move where, again, we're putting them in a situation where they need to teach us. They'll share as much as they want to. And in my experience, the communities that we've worked with are extremely generous. I've actually never seen such generous people. So I know that people will want to. But I think if you work in collaboration, in partnership with an Indigenous person who can show you the way, at least you know that you're not completely crashing the party. At least you're coming in with someone who knows the rules of the game, because that it is a game and there are rules. So I think we need to just be respectful. That's it.
Glenys Collard and Celeste Rodriguez Louro, thank you for taking the time to chat today.
Thank you.
No worries. That was a wicked long.
There's a lot there.
That was amazing. In the end, I heard, I can't remember who said it, but someone said, "Oh, that was a good long yarn.
That was a wicked long yarn."
But I didn't think it was long enough. She clearly just got into her stride when you started saying, "So, in conclusion."
It was a master class, wasn't it? And it was just great to see the contributions and the interplay between, Celeste, the experienced linguist, and then Glenys, the experienced field worker, the one who's been steeped in Aboriginal culture for the entirety of her life, who comes with so much knowledge of that. And to see the respect between them and the way they work together and play off of each other's strengths.
Yeah. I thought that was really cool. But Glenys had been involved in sort of research on Aboriginal ancestral languages on Noongar before, correct?
That's right. She was working on that with Alan Dench.
Yeah. So she's been involved in these sort of like white academic spaces of working on Indigenous languages for a long time.
Decades.
Yeah. Yeah, what a treasure trove of experience and knowledge.
The message that I wanted, that came to me through all of this, and the reason I'm glad I took the approach I did for this interview was, are we hearing Aboriginal voices? Are we hearing the voices of the people who are giving us information? If you don't, just step back and listen. You're going to miss it. You'll be that doctor, right? The doctor who, Glenys shows up, the doctor doesn't want a yarn. She doesn't want a yarn. The doctor goes away without getting the information that they want.
Yeah.
Or you can be the doctor who sits down and has a yarn, and
honestly, that's
process,
what I would wish. And I'm not an Australian Indigenous person, but I've been trying to go to doctors here, and they have very short amount of time. And I'm like, so I'm feeling this way and this, and I have a little bit of pain over here. And they're like, you're essentially fine. You're fine. You're fine. We did a blood test on you. You're fine. Goodbye. And I'm like, oh, okay. Goodbye.
And you miss it. I think maybe everybody needs that.
Yeah, I think everyone needs to sit back and listen. I think podcasts actually are great spaces for these kinds of conversations. I don't know about you guys, but I imagine that some of our listeners, when they put on our show or put on similar podcasts, they go in it for the long haul. They're doing the dishes or something, and they're happy for there to be some bit of lull or something. It doesn't need to be like Cartoon Network with like action every 4 seconds. They're happy to let things rest a bit and let them mature. And yeah, a lot of these like more long form discussions are really useful to have specifically on podcasts, I think.
But the information structure, was way different than I expected, even though I knew that culturally there's a thing where you might start at the end and then come back around to the beginning. And I just found that it all came together very satisfyingly, and I really liked that. And
you guys talked about a lot of interesting things. I thought it was very interesting you talked about the sort of focus on ancestral Indigenous languages and the focus on Aboriginal Englishes, and how Glenys was saying that some ancestral languages are sort of not getting new words for new things. So they are becoming, in a sense, she didn't use those words, I'll use it, less useful to people.
Very important.
Because, yeah, it is very important. Yeah.
But not as useful. I got that too.
Yeah, they can't talk about the things that concern them on an everyday basis, and that Australian Aboriginal English is the language or the languages that people use for those things.
And, as linguists, we lament the loss of traditional languages, and we hope that people in the community will take them up, which is absolutely not our call, which is totally up to them, because language for them means what it means for them. But if I said, gee, I really hope that people will keep Noongar going, well, an Aboriginal person might say, that's great, but we do have Aboriginal English, which is a language that we use, and which actually contains a lot of Noongar itself. So really?
Yeah.
We're doing okay.
Yeah. And I found it very interesting the way they were talking as well about how to do research and how to do research with people and not sort of at people.
Yeah.
Which is really hard to do.
Which we haven't always been good at doing.
We haven't always been good at doing, and it is really hard, and a lot of the research paradigms we have set up are not apt to doing that, honestly. Like, they're not created that way, and we've learned a lot of things from doing research the way we have for decades, so it's hard to switch to doing it in another way, and that's why projects like this one are very interesting, as they're showing us new methodologies for how to gather data and how to work with people. I think before I came to Australia, I was already aware from linguistics, like friends in Europe, that working with Indigenous communities in Australia was more, what's the word? That communities put more demands on researchers. That there were recordings that not everyone was allowed to listen to, that there were words that not everyone was allowed to learn, that there were names that you wouldn't use, there were recordings of people who had passed away that you weren't allowed to use. And I remember as a European before I came to Australia thinking, oh wow, that's so different from how fieldwork and linguistics is done almost everywhere else. And now, having been in Australia for a while, I sort of think that it's a shining beacon of like how it is. A lot of those things are like how we should work with people, how we should, now I only get the word in Swedish in my head. How we should enact and take care of the trust that people place in us, I think is what I'm looking for.
Well, it was a very good experience for me. And so I'd just like to thank Glenys Collard and Dr. Celeste Rodriguez Louro for giving us the time to have a bit of a yarn. We hope that you've enjoyed this episode. You can send your reactions and ideas to us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Mastodon, and Patreon. We are Because Lang Pod on all of those places. If you like this show, please tell friends about us and leave us a review everywhere that you can leave reviews. That will help other people find us, and that is what we like.
We are very grateful for everyone that listens to us, and we are continually impressed with the smart questions and the smart feedback you give us. And we are particularly impressed and grateful to our lovely patrons at Patreon, and we would hereby like to thank them especially. And they are Termy, Chris B, Lissa, The Major, Chris L, Matt, Whitney, Damien, Helen, Bob, Jack, Christelle, Elias, Michael, Larry, Kitty, Lord Mortis, Bin, Christopher, Dustin, Andy, Mai, Nigel, Kate, Jen, Nasrin, Nikolai, Aisha, Emma, and Andrew. Thanks to all of you.
Our next episode is a patron-only mailbag. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure that you get those questions to us. hello@becauselanguage.com. And also, to listen to all of our bonus episodes, jump onto patreon.com/becauselangpod. Our music is written and performed by Drew Kroplyanov. You can hear him in two bands, at least Ryan Bino and Didion's Bible. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time. Because Language.
Orange juice. Juice of the gods, isn't it?
I have not had that for a really long time because my young daughters were overly fond of it, and it's a little bit sugary. So it is a pleasure that must be denied all of us until they do not love it so much.
They have, which I know they also have in Australia, there's this new trendy thing where you can get freshly squeezed orange juice in the supermarket.
Mm.
You go up to a machine and it has a bunch of oranges in it. And there's no human involved, which I love.
They have one of those at our local IKEA.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Like that you can buy the machine or that you can use?
You can use it. I think it would be a bit expensive to buy.
You know that juice-like substance you can buy in America that's called like Tang?
Yeah, I have memories of Tang, although my parents never liked me to have it. They were against pleasure.
Yeah, I've had Tang. Well, look at you. What are you doing to your children?
I'm not giving them Tang. I'm just simply denying them orange juice.
Yeah.
I suppose you're right. I suppose the Puritan yet lives within me still.